couple reminders of all the great content and all the great features of BangTheBook.com. Hop into those contests. Try out your luck for some cash prizes there. Free to enter. Just sign up with your email address. Daily Streaker Contest, monthly pick of the day, top monthly win percentage, top ROI, top number of units won. Again, cash prizes available for those. Give them a shot here, especially if you are somebody just starting out in the sports betting world. Good chance for you to get your feet wet without putting too much on the line. But you can also use all the great content that's over there to your advantage. Our matchup data section shows you side-by-side comparisons of the two teams in each game. We've got free picks and predictions for all of the college football bowl games, all of the NFL games here this weekend as well. Daily NHL, daily NBA, college basketball, power ratings, situational betting articles. So much going on over there. We are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. Finally, this edition of Bang the Book Radio is presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. If you sign up using that promo code BTB and the number 25, you get a $25 free bet just for signing up, 100% deposit match bonus for the sportsbook, and 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino as well. If you already have an account over at DSI or you want to try out somewhere else, check out our sportsbook review section over at BangTheBook.com, which is BangTheBook.com/sportsbooks. You'll get a chance to look at all of the options that are available to you, including some exclusive deposit promo codes for those books as well. Two segments to wrap up this week here on Bang the Book Radio. The first, our Westgate SuperContest selection segment, myself and Joe Everett. Joe, how's it going today, man?
Going well. Glad to be on. Just getting murdered by these bowl games, so thinking of just sticking to the NFL to close out the season.
As you and I were talking about before we started recording here, I don't know if that's the greatest plan because this week in the NFL does look really, really challenging. And obviously next week, kind of a crapshoot with everything that's going on there with teams resting guys, backup quarterbacks playing, teams looking for draft position, kind of mailing it in there in week 17. So these last 2 weeks of the NFL, definitely going to be a challenge. Looks like it's a challenge for me here this week. I've got 3 plays that I like, 3 games that are in the leans list, but to be completely honest with you, like I said, I won't go the opposite direction more often than not of any of the picks I talk about, maybe the leans. But this week, I will go until the 11th hour here in terms of picking my Super Contest card and getting those picks sent into our proxy here on Friday night. A shout-out to Vegas Maddie. If anybody wants to hop in the Super Contest next year, and I imagine if you listen to this segment, you have some dreams of possibly winning this thing, check out Vegas Maddie and what he offers over there at footballcontest.com. Great proxy for us. He's been very, very good, always receptive if you send him an email or a text or something like that. So if you are looking to hop in this thing next year and you need a proxy, he'd be the guy to go and see. My Bang the Book podcast entry now 38-36-1 on the season, 2-2-1 last week. So, Joe, I brought you back anyway, even though my luck maybe ran out a little bit. But I am still 10-4-1 over the last 3 weeks, so that's a nice little run here at the end of the year. BangTheBook.com entry, 4-1 last week, 40-34-1 on the season, 2 points clear of me. So, unfortunately, site bragging rights may go in his direction again this season. The field, 51.92% last week. However, we had 347 pushes because Pittsburgh and New England pushed, Dallas and Oakland also pushed, and there was another game I can't think of off the top of my head. But in any event, we had 3 games that pushed last week. So the available picks to grade against, not as many as we've seen in weeks past, but still almost 52%, now 50.34% on the year. The Gold, 53.07% last week, 50.67% on the year. Joe, as we were talking about before we came on the air here, and as I was kind of alluding to there in my introductory segment, there is so much to consider this week. I mean, every week in the NFL has its own unique challenges, but this week with favorites inflated because of how they've done the last 7-8 weeks, with favorites inflated because a lot of them are in must-win types of situations for home field, divisions, playoff races, whatever. This is a pretty ugly-looking card.
Yeah, it is that time of year. Players realize that the future is coming up, and they may not even be on that team. Coaches realize things are changing, and now we've got owners potentially changing. So, yeah, that really throws a monkey wrench in Week 16, and it's been so tough. I mean, almost looking at the last few weeks, you want to just blindly take these favorites because they're covering so well. But I don't know, looking at some of these numbers, it's going to be hard for these favorites to cover. I mean, a lot of them are on the road getting favored almost a touchdown. It's just, you pretty much nailed it before we started recording. It's just an ugly card, and yeah, I don't know. It's like one of those weeks you get kind of a bad feeling before you start writing down the picks and jotting down your leans. It's that's week 16 is looking gnarly.
So let me ask you this, Joe, in terms of how much you've followed the NFL, and I know that you largely talk to these players when they are college kids and when they're going through, the process of making that leap in their careers, but you have two schools of thought mostly, I would say, when it comes to the NFL, when it comes to motivation. A lot of people think, well, these guys are professionals. They're playing for jobs. They're playing for, reps next year. Whatever the case may be with their personal situations, a lot of people think they're going to show up and play no matter what. Now, there's also just the human nature side of things where if you have a team that's been riddled with injuries all year long, it's late in the season, you're not going anywhere, you personally, don't really care if the team picks 5th or picks 7th or picks 12th. You're just ready for this thing to be over. So maybe you're not as motivated. So which side do you tend to lean towards here? I mean, do you expect these teams to come out and play because they're professionals and they should? Or do you think there are some teams that, will roll over this week again?
Percentage of pros playing for tomorrow, playing for a future contract is still going to outweigh those front runners that give up and say they're out of it and they just, mail it in. I think there's just a smaller group of those, but there are teams. I mean, the Bengals we've been talking about 2 weeks in a row, it just looks, evident that there's a lot of quit right on the faces of some of those players. I mean, that's and I don't know what they're playing for. So that there's the exception, but I still see some teams. San Francisco, yes, 4-10 out of it, but we've talked about their culture change and having that new quarterback. But even the Bears, I still think the Bears are playing tough. Yes, John Fox is a dead man walking, and that whole coaching staff's about to change, but there's some good players that want to be here next year and want to play next year. So that's, I think that's a team. I think the Cardinals, there's a lot of guys on that roster that still have not thrown in the towel. So I don't think there's one easy answer there, but still you can't get away from some of those players that just have quit on the year and are making plans for the Bahamas or the Keys or wherever they're taking their vacation upcoming. So I think that you can't get away from some of that, but I still think it's a smaller percentage.
Well, and it's so interesting here to look at the underdogs and the particular situations that they're in. I mean, obviously for the Colts, there's a decent chance that Chuck Pagano goes. For the Packers, may not be Mike McCarthy, but Dom Capers may be on his way out the door. We already know that Marvin Lewis is. Todd Bowles, I think with the effort his team showed this year, I think he's safe, but I don't know that for sure. Tennessee, we talked about a possible offensive coordinator change there. The Browns, Hugh Jackson should be gone, but probably won't be. Tampa Bay should move on from Dirk Cotter, but I don't know if they will. Excuse me. The Falcons are right there in the playoff hunt. The Broncos just hired Vance Joseph, so I doubt they'd get rid of him, but you never know. Miami, Adam Gase is safe. Maybe next year we'll see what he does with Ryan Tannehill back. The Bills are obviously still fighting. 49ers are fighting with Jimmy Garoppolo. The Giants, new head coach is going to be coming in there. Probably a new quarterback if Eli Manning is gone. The Seahawks, they're still fighting for the playoffs, but they may just be too injured to care. Houston and Bill O'Brien, Bill O'Brien should still be safe, should still get one more year because they look pretty good with Deshaun Watson. But who knows? They're the Raiders. They just need a lot of help on the defensive side of the ball. Jack Del Rio will be safe. I think the coordinators are both safe as well. But after what happened to them last week, which is something I'll talk about here in a little bit, I doubt that they come with much of an effort. So you do have a lot of these underdogs here that have situations in terms of coaches or coordinators being on the chopping block, and it can be hard to sort of read through and figure out which of those teams are going to show up and which ones are not for those coaches.
Oh, it is, and I think that's the one thing you brought up. It just sticks in my mind. I think Dom Capers is a goner. I think both he and Dick LeBeau, those schemes are just gone the way of the dodo. I mean, the zone blitz used to work, but having those safeties a mile off of the box is just getting them killed. And I think I hate to say it, but those two guys in particular are becoming dinosaurs. If Tennessee doesn't change that defensive scheme, they're going to be in a world of hurt. I mean, they definitely have to regroup, and I think it's just both of those guys. Teams know how to attack that scheme, and there's a reason why a lot of the other franchises have gotten away from that just exclusive 3-4 look. So I think, you nailed it on those two coaches. I expect them to be definitely gearing towards retirement coming here.
Yeah, I mean, think about it, too. The Pittsburgh Steelers have done a great job infusing talent, infusing more of a pass rush, drafting, developing well, but it's probably not a coincidence that once Dick LeBeau left, that defense really started to turn the corner because of exactly what you're talking about. You're playing an archaic type of scheme, and it's a similar thing with the Browns and Greg Williams where his safeties are 20 yards off the ball. They're getting carved up by every tight end in the NFL. I mean, Ben Watson looked like he was 28 years old again in that game that the Ravens just played against Cleveland. Mike Wallace was getting free in the middle of the field. It doesn't work anymore. And, the Browns are good against the run and, so be it. But they can't defend the pass. If you can't defend the pass in today's NFL, you ain't winning shit. That's just the way it is. The quarterback-driven league, you're not winning anything. So, we'll have to see what happens with all of these teams and these situations in particular, not just this week, but, of course, obviously next week as well. Bringing this back to the Super Contest here, Granny's Boy leads by 1.5 points with 52.5 points. Stag Capital leading in the Super Contest Gold with 46 points. One thing I do want our listeners to watch out for next season, and we'll see if this leads to any sort of change here at BangTheBook.com, but there's one entry over 60% in the Super Contest Gold. That's Stag Capital, who's your leader. The money, everybody in the money in the Super Contest is over 60%, and in fact, over 62%. So yeah, even though the Super Contest Gold is a winner-take-all event, when you look at the Super Contest field and you look at what you have to do to even be in the running, to be even close, maybe that's going to lead to a bigger Super Contest Gold field next year and maybe a smaller traditional Super Contest field. So that will be something for us to ponder over the summertime and then, of course, as we get ready for next year's Super Contest. But, Joe, we'll go ahead and get into the Week 16 games that I like here. Again, these are most likely going to be picks on my card. I won't take the opposite side in these three games. Beginning with rotation order number 8, the New York Jets, who are plus 6.5 here at home against the Los Angeles Chargers. And for the Chargers, their playoff prospects are very, very slim. They're only down a game in the AFC West, but because they lost both head-to-head meetings with the Chiefs, Kansas City does hold the tiebreaker. So the Chargers effectively need to win twice and get Kansas City to lose twice in order to win that division. And I just don't really think that's going to be the case. Kansas City favored by 10.5 here this week against the Miami Dolphins. So, for the Chargers, I mean, they had their chance. They had that head-to-head meeting with Kansas City, didn't really show up for it. Chiefs looked very, very good in that game. Now the Chargers going cross-country, early kickoff at the Meadowlands, and, this Jets team has not quit. This Jets team has played hard all year long. They exceeded their win total. They exceeded expectations. A lot of it had to do with the way that Josh McCown played and the way that he, led this offense as a veteran. And I know that they don't have him, but they went out there and covered the number last week against a very, very good New Orleans Saints team. I just don't see why you'd want to lay a big number with the Chargers here. A team that, they've played a lot better, but let's keep in mind, who they played, the situations that they were in. They beat up Dallas on Thanksgiving when the Cowboys were just reeling with injuries. Turnovers, really helped them in that Buffalo game where they buried the Bills early with Nathan Peterman getting the start. They beat up the Browns, who aren't any good. They beat up the Redskins, who aren't any good. Played a team with a pulse last week and lost. So I think the Jets still have a pulse because I think there are some guys that want to fight for Todd Bowles, and I think there are some guys that just want to fight for contracts going into next year. So I think the Jets are the play this week.
I like the look. You mentioned the Chargers are on a wing and a prayer. They need so much help to get in, and I guess the Bills might lose the Pats, and the Rams probably beat the Titans, but still the Chiefs and that tiebreaker. it's just so tough to go on the road anywhere and get a win. And, the Jets have not given up. They forced 3 turnovers against the Saints. Made me want to rip my hair out having a New Orleans first-half ticket. But one thing that sticks out about the Jets is defense. We talked about team speed and linebackers to cover. And when you've got a slow linebacker out there trying to cover running backs, tight ends, or whatever, and they're outmatched, it's just blatant. But these two, for the Jets, are real athletes. I mean, Demario Davis from Arkansas State was a late ad at the Senior Bowl one year, and he just showed up first day of practice, easily the fastest linebacker out there. And then you know all about Deron Lee. I mean, this guy was a former option quarterback in high school. I mean, he is blazing fast. So really, this Jets defense has a lot of speed. They've got some athletes, and if there's a team that's going to keep it close, you're getting points, you're at home, and there's not much quit in this Jets team. And I think dismissing Muhammad Wilkerson last week may have been a little bit of a wake-up call that he needed. I think Leonard Williams might be a little dinged for this game, but outside of that, I would not mind the Jets this week at all.
Yeah, and I think that there are a couple of other factors in play here. One of them being that the Chargers have laid one number on the road this season, and they got bet into a favorite against Dallas. That was a line that opened pick'em, but Dallas, with all of those injury problems that they had, the Chargers wound up being the sharp and public side in that game. So this is the first time that they've actually opened a road favorite this season, and this is a team that, up until that little 4-game winning streak when they beat up on some bums, they were playing a lot of close games in the fourth quarter, and they were coming up on the wrong side of a lot of them as well. So now you take them out on the East Coast, 10 a.m. kickoff for them. Weather doesn't look like it's going to be a factor. I wish it was going to be. But the Chargers have the 3rd worst run defense in the NFL by yards per carry. They've given up actually the 2nd worst rush defense by yards per carry. They've allowed 4.8 yards per attempt. Only New England is worse. Spoiler alert, they're coming up later on the show. So, if the Jets can run the football, if the Jets can own the line of scrimmage here, you're limiting the number of possessions for the Chargers. It's going to be an early start. You take away what they do really well on defense with guys like Casey Hayward, Melvin Ingram, Joey Bosa. If you make them stop the run, they're not as good at doing it. And when you look at the teams that they've blown out here lately, teams that couldn't really, they didn't have any offensive balance. They didn't have any answers early on for what the Chargers were doing in those games. And also one other thing about the Chargers that I've been harping on here over the last several weeks, they are terrible in the red zone. Now, they're going to get Keenan Allen back for this game in all likelihood, but they're really, really bad at converting trips inside the 20 into 6 and 7 points. If you can't do that and you're laying 6.5, how are you supposed to cover the number? I think everything points to the Jets here. Maybe the Jets do quit. Maybe they get blown out. They lose by 30. That's always a possibility here in the last 2 weeks of the season. But I think there's line value, and I would not be surprised if the Jets do find a way to win this game.
Oh, yeah, and what really stinks for the Chargers in the red zone is that Hunter Henry now is done for the year with that kidney. I mean, that was supposed to be one of their weapons when they're in tight quarters, just throw a jump ball to the big man from Arkansas, and that is no longer an option. And sure, maybe Keenan Allen comes back, but that back cannot be 100. You don't get carted off with a back injury and to just come back 100%. I'm sorry. So that's, there's some holes in this Chargers scenario this week.
All right, the next game that I like here, as I mentioned, I will talk about the New England Patriots, and I'm going to do it by fading them here by taking the Buffalo Bills this week, number 22 in the SuperContest rotation order. They're getting 11.5 here in this one. And look, there are a lot of spot reasons to take Buffalo here. Of course, they're fighting for their playoff lives, so they have to do everything that they possibly can to stay in the playoff hunt, find some way to win this game if possible. Now, clearly with the spread, they're probably not going to. But for New England here, coming off of that dramatic game against Pittsburgh, we saw the look-ahead spot when they were playing Miami. Why not get a letdown spot here against Buffalo? I know they've got things to play for, namely home field advantage, but they're an 11.5-point favorite. So they're not really concerned with losing this game. I just don't think that they have to put any style points on this thing. For Buffalo, they're mostly competitive up there at Foxborough. Shady McCoy, most rushing yards in the league for any back since Week 10. Oh, and by the way, the Patriots, worst rush defense in the league, allowing 4.9 yards per carry. So Buffalo should control the line of scrimmage, keep Tom Brady off the field. They run the rock effectively, limit the number of possessions. Again, this is a very, very big number. This Patriots defense still has a lot of problems. And, I think coming off of that game last week, which a lot of people believe, and it probably comes to fruition, that was an AFC championship game preview, going and playing the Bills here, a team that you've beaten a lot throughout, the Belichick and Brady tenure. I just don't know if you get the full focus and the best effort here from Buffalo, or from New England, excuse me.
Yeah, it just looks like too many points for a tough spot, letting down after a really big game, nationally televised, and especially for that defense. I cannot get it out of my mind, that play. That Juju Smith-Schuster, just a shallow cross, 5 yards, he takes it 70 because of poor tackling, undisciplined. They didn't even get the edges. I mean, someone push that man out of bounds, please. I think that's what kills me about this coaching list that came out. Matt Patricia is some A-list coaching candidate. I will fade Matt Patricia as soon as he gets a job outside of New England. I think he's a bit of a fraud. But beyond that, I just don't understand how that play happens at the end of the Steelers game. And, this is a situation to where Buffalo's coming in, a venue they know well, a team they know pretty doggone well. So, I wouldn't mind a Buffalo ticket there either, but just because of the spot alone. But also, this Patriots defense, man, this has got to be one of the worst New England defenses I've seen. Just from, once again, I hammer away team speed. They've got none. Hopefully Kyle Van Noy gets back soon, because those linebackers they've got running out there, that's got to be an area in the draft the Patriots are really thinking about hard, is adding someone with coverage ability in that linebacking room, because outside of Van Noy, who's not a great athlete either, he's just smart. So that's, this Patriots defense is definitely a problem going forward, and sure, they'll be in the playoffs, but that's something to think about in their future matchups. It's maybe overs, or just, they're going to have to outscore teams. There's just no other way.
Well, and for New England here in this spot, Kyle Van Noy is practicing, supposedly looked pretty good in practice on Wednesday and Thursday, so maybe he does come back here for this one. But still, it's going to take him a little bit of time to get back into rhythm, and of course, if they do have a big lead in this game, I'm sure they'll limit his snap count as well. You've got an angle here, too. I mean, the cheap shot on Tre'Davious White from Rob Gronkowski, maybe that plays into the equation for Buffalo. But here's what I really like about this game. I tell our listeners all the time, look for context clues in the line. Look for those things that you can use that can sort of, tip the hands of what the odds makers are thinking. So when New England played in Buffalo, and this was back on December 3rd, the Patriots were laying 7.5. Now, favorites are covering left and right. We talked about that at the top of the segment here. The last 7 weeks or something like that, favorites are well up over 60%. So why is this number only 11.5? When you flip home field advantage, you figure Buffalo's probably getting 3 because their fans are ridiculous and they jump through tables and everything while they're tailgating. But you know that New England's getting 3 here as well. So why is this number only 11.5? Shouldn't this number be closer to 2 touchdowns? Shouldn't it be 13.5, 14, something like that? It opened 12.5, so it was a little bit closer, but favorites are covering like crazy. Everybody loves the Patriots. Belichick and Brady, greater than 60% against the spread, together as a tandem. Why isn't this line higher? Why is this line only 11.5? Why is it the early sharp side this week? I think there's a lot of context that you can take out of that number. And like I said, because this number should be closer to 2 touchdowns, and it's not, to me, it looks like Buffalo is the right side here. And again, much like that Jets game, if they get blown out, it's not going to surprise anybody, and it's certainly not going to surprise me either. But again, I'm looking to find line value here. I'm looking for spots where I think favorites are inflated. This is a spot where, to me, I don't think the favorite is inflated, and I think that there's a reason behind that. So I will take Buffalo this week.
Yeah, I think they're telling you a lot with that plus 11.5. You're right. It should 13.5, 14. That's what it would be at any other point in the season, given the home team here. So, yeah, I think it's a good look.
All right, one more game that I do really like on my picks list, and I talked about this one on Thursday, and I told you it was going to show up here on the SuperContest segment, and it absolutely is. I'm taking the Philadelphia Eagles this week. Took the Eagles last week. didn't work out in my favor. I mean, Nick Foles did what I expected him to do. The problem is that the Eagles defense gave up 500 yards, and I didn't expect that at all. This week, though, everything points in their direction. I don't know why this line isn't double digits. I think it should close double digits or higher, but I see no way the Raiders are competitive. I mean, you think about how they lost that Sunday Night Football game that we talked about on Monday's NFL Week in Review and Monday Night Football preview segment. How do they get off the deck? How do they go east, play this game with cross-country travel on the night of Christmas against a team that's so much better than they are? I have no idea how the Raiders show up here and get off the deck. And Philadelphia's got some things to play for. Now, of course, they're going to know if they have home field or not based on what Minnesota does in their game on Saturday. You know, that, to me, that's kind of irrelevant here because I think the Eagles treat this game, as I talked about on Thursday's show, playoff dress rehearsal. I think they want Nick Foles to keep pushing forward. They've got a great defense to face in terms of that. Raiders have allowed the highest completion percentage, 69%, which is anything but nice, and they're second worst in adjusted net yards per pass attempt. Foles has a good matchup. The Eagles' defense has a good matchup to bounce back because Derek Carr just doesn't seem to have any rapport with any of his receivers right now. The offensive line's missing Donald Penn, so the Eagles should get in the backfield. This looks like blowout central to me on Monday night.
Yeah, the last one is the biggie in my opinion. No Donald Penn just changes their whole outlook. I mean, that guy was just super reliable, and that streak of games started in the regular season. So that just really turns the Raiders to a band of Muppets on offense and defense. They were already there on defense, but now with that inability to score, inability to pound the rock, I think the Eagles needing that home field advantage is the other aspect. And I think, though, that's part of the give up. I mean, the Raiders coaching staff is going to be back. I mean, Del Rio's back. He just got John Pagano in there instead of Ken Norton, which is what he wanted to do the whole time. I don't know why it took till, week 12. That's their problem, not ours. So, I think fading the Raiders the rest of the way out there's nothing wrong with that, especially a team that, sure, the Vikings, they'll find out that home field advantage if they need, but still, you got to think the Vikings will handle their business against the Aaron Rodgers-less Packers team. So, I think either way, the Eagles are playing hard here. They want to see what Foles has got. And, this is just a terrible secondary. I mean, what's sad is they put money into it. They've got draft picks out there, and it's not working. I don't care who the coordinator is. The personnel on that side of the ball, outside of Khalil Mack, they really just don't have a lot.
Well, when you look at what's gone on here with Oakland over the last several weeks, so you look at that game against Miami that they won going into the bye, and you kind of think to yourself, okay, maybe this is a team that can make a run at this thing. Obviously, they started slowly, that huge win, and maybe that was a turning point for them. Then, with a week to prepare, you get blown out in Mexico City by a New England team playing its second straight game in altitude. And then, you bounce back and beat Denver, but Denver's not very good. You beat the Giants by a touchdown but fail to cover. Then you absolutely no-show against Kansas City when they come back to the pack for you. And then the way you lost last week, I just think, not just physically with the injuries that they have on the offensive side, but emotionally, I just don't think this team has anything left. I mean, they've already been an underachiever all year long, after overachieving last year. I don't see any way that they show up in this game. I don't know if there's anybody out there for that team that, can be a lead by example type of guy. The defense knows it's going to be blown up, as well it should be. The offense, Derek Carr needs some help, whether it's another receiver, whether it's a back that can actually, make some significant plays, because Marshawn Lynch just, he's not really an explosive player anymore. There's a lot of change coming in Oakland here, and I think the players know that, and I think when you can sense that, coming off of how they lost last week, I just think it's an embarrassing no-show. And even if it's not, Philadelphia is good enough to cover this number anyway. So this is probably not just my favorite play of the week, probably one of my favorite plays of the year. Now that I say that, Philadelphia will find a way to lose at home, but man, you can't talk me off of this game. You couldn't do it.
And I won't try it. Amari Cooper's knee, I think, has been a problem all year, and if everyone wants to point to those drops that he's had, I think that's a related thing. I mean, you're always compensating for that injury, thinking about it in the back, and that's why the drops have occurred. Now he's on the shelf, and then the other injury with Derek Carr's back, still not right. Watching these Raiders games, he is noticeably just limping to the sidelines. I don't see him running anywhere. I mean, he'll run when it counts, but he is walking around awful ginger. I think that's another guy. Off season, we're going to find out he's going to go through some surgeries, and that's one part of the Raiders organization at this point. There is nothing to play for. Why you don't just put this guy on the shelf and kind of file it away for next year lost season is beyond me. But, yeah, I'm not going to talk you off an Eagles play at all.
All right, so we'll look at the leans that I'm thinking about here, and I really do like the three plays that I've discussed. And as far as the leans, these are kind of like the prettiest girls left in the bar when we're getting closer to last call, because there's not a whole lot that I love here on this week's card. One that is on my leans list here is the Tennessee Titans, number 10 in the SuperContest rotation order, plus 6.5. And I'm going through these by rotation order. I'm not going through them in terms of how much I like them, because the Titans probably wouldn't be at the top of the leans list. If they can get off the deck, and that's a big old if after what happened to them with Jimmy Garoppolo, getting Robbie Gould in the position to hit that walk-off kick last week, that really, really hurt the Titans from a playoff standpoint. If they can get off the deck, this is a good spot for them catching 6.5. It's an inflated number with the Rams coming to town off that Seahawks blowout. And keep in mind here, I mean, the Rams blew the Seahawks out in the first half, put it in cruise control in the second half, so they did get a little bit of a blow. But now it's a long trip out to Nashville, after you just slayed a division rival and, a game that you desperately wanted, a game that you had circled since the first time you played Seattle this year. For the Rams, they still have a shot, I guess, at moving up and getting into a bye, but I don't think that's going to happen. If Minnesota takes care of its business like we expect, they should be in pretty good shape to, take down one of those top two seeds. So for the Rams, you're playing at home in the division round and you're in the wild card round, and you're going on the road in the division round, and you kind of know that. So, if I'm Sean McVay, my first task is to keep Todd Gurley healthy. My second is to keep Jared Goff healthy. And my third is, to make sure that we have things squared away going into the playoffs. So if Tennessee plays with some desperation, then I think they're in a pretty decent spot here to cover this number, possibly find a way to win the game. I mean, they are still right there. If the playoffs started today, they'd be in them. So they have plenty of reasons to get off the deck. I know it's not an easy thing to do because last week's win would have put them in really, really good position. But this is a number that just looks too high to me. If the Rams place Seattle to a game that's a reasonable score, this number is probably more like 4. And I'm not exactly getting great numbers with 5 and 6, but it is a sign that this line is a little bit inflated.
Oh, big time. And they got up for that game, too. So that's another thing to think about in this matchup. The problem I have, it looks like there's no Logan Ryan for the Titans, which is basically their only cornerback with a pulse. Outside of that, you get a bunch of stiffs in the secondary. We talked about Dick LeBeau's defense. Jared Goff could have a big day. Those safeties, the way they're playing, if Joe Everett and Tyler Higbee are healthy, they should be featured in this game plan. It's just tough to get on the Titans side after the horrible football they've been playing. But what are they, 5-1 at home? This is, as you mentioned, this is a good spot to get right. They still have the playoffs in front of them. They just have to kind of just get some smelling salts, get smacked in the face, and realize, hey, you still have a pulse. Let's make something of this. So, yeah, this is kind of, I think you said it perfectly, pick themselves off the mat and dust yourself off and kind of get ready for the postseason for the Titans. This might be the week, but, boy, it's a tough matchup with all those weapons the Rams have, even outside of Gurley. I'm worried about these tight ends and definitely worried about these receivers against just a really horrible cornerback room without Logan Ryan.
Yeah, that is the big problem is, Tennessee's secondary is just so bad. But I will say this. I mean, if they can get the running game going, and they really haven't the last 3-4 weeks. I mean, DeMarco Murray has not been very good. Derrick Henry has not been very good. But the Rams allow 4.7 yards per carry. And it's kind of interesting. You look at what's going on around the NFL where you got some really good teams that don't stop the run. But they put all their focuses on stopping the pass. And, in today's NFL, it's really what you want to do. I mean, the Saints, they're bottom 5 in yards per carry allowed. The Jaguars, bottom 5. The Steelers are 7th worst. The Falcons are 8th worst. Cowboys are 9th worst. These are all teams in the playoff hunt, and obviously the Patriots, who are the worst in the league. So, it's a calculated decision, I think, to be a little bit weaker against the run in terms of putting yourself in a position to stop the pass. Tennessee doesn't really want to throw the football all that much if Terry Robisky knows what's good for him anyway. So maybe Tennessee does get a little bit more efficient with the running game. If they do, they should hang around with this number, limit the number of possessions in the game, all that type of thing. Early kickoff for the Rams. So I think there are some compelling reasons to take Tennessee. This one may end up making the card almost reluctantly, but, again, not a whole lot that I really love here this week. Another one that's on my leans list here, number 23, the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're 4.5-point favorites going out against the San Francisco Jimmy Garoppolos. And, look, I get it. The Garoppolo hype train has as much steam as it deserves to have. The guys look phenomenal. But gets a real test here this week against the Jaguars, who, as I mentioned, defend the pass really well. Lots of pressure. They're called Saxonville for a reason. The concern here with the Jaguars is that, they've already locked up the South with a Tennessee loss. Tennessee, obviously, a 6.5-point dog. So, Jacksonville's going to know what's going on in the division. If Tennessee loses and they get the division, well, take some of the wind out of their sails in terms of wanting to play this one. Still an outside shot at home field advantage. Pittsburgh doesn't play until Monday night. So, they have some playoff scenarios and some incentives there. But still, this is a team that has not fared well going out to the West Coast. Different team now, obviously. But there are some risk factors in play with taking Jacksonville.
Oh, certainly. But I think this is another line that's just a bit off due to past success. That, yes, Jimmy Garoppolo, and I'm banging the table, one of his biggest supporters, but he doesn't win those 3 games against so-so defenses, then this line's much bigger in Jacksonville's favor. So I think there's value there, and it's been a great 3 games, but reality, I think, is really about to set in for San Francisco at this point, because this is just a whole class up of team that they're playing. So, yeah, I think you take a little value, and there's nothing wrong with getting on the side of a team that's just blowing the doors off of everybody they've faced. I mean, pretty much. It's just they've made some really good quarterbacks look bad. I mean, that's probably one of Ben Roethlisberger's worst games of his career, and it came against this defense. So, I don't think wrong with jumping on the Saxonville wagon, even though it's going to come at the peril of my man Jimmy G.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, yeah, this kid's played great, and he's picked up a couple of road wins, but man, they needed 5 field goals against the Bears to win that game 15-14. Beat a Texans team that, as we talked about, relative to their performance last week, seems to have quit on the season, and then needed that last-second walk-off kick against the Titans, who really haven't played all that well, and their secondary is not any good. So, Garoppolo gets a real test here this week, and maybe it is a decent time to step in front of him. I also wonder, too, and I can't really speak to this. It's something that maybe I'll have to read through the Kyle Shanahan coach speak, but one of the reasons they were so worried about throwing Garoppolo out there is that they want him healthy for next year. Give him a full offseason with Kyle Shanahan. Well, Jacksonville can come and get you. So do they use Carlos Hyde a little bit more here? That was something I speculated in my daily fantasy piece I posted today. Maybe Carlos Hyde's a value guy because Jacksonville doesn't defend the run all that well. Maybe you take it out of Garoppolo's hands. You don't put him into too many bad situations in this game, especially if you're in the second half and you're trailing. Maybe you just kind of run the clock out and just get everybody out of there healthy. That could be something we see Kyle Shanahan do. So maybe that's a factor. Maybe the playbook and the game plan changes a little bit here, with a higher element of risk going up against a Jacksonville team that has a pass rush, unlike the last 3 teams they've played.
I think that's how they're going to have to go, especially that they just lost Trent Brown, the right tackle now. So you're looking at 2 backup tackles against a great pass rush. Carlos Hyde will have to be featured, not just in the running game. They're going to have to figure a way to get him back in the passing game. Since Garoppolo's been there, Carlos Hyde is now a ghost as far as targets and the amount of receptions he was having. So I think they've got to get a little bit back to more of that. But, I mean, at the end, just what you were talking about, the Robbie Gould cannot field goal Jacksonville to death. I just don't see how that's going to happen. So that's why I think you kind of have to lean Jags here.
One more game that's on the leans list, and as we're talking here, I sort of like the first two, maybe enough to put them on the card. If I had to have the card in on Thursday night when we're recording here, Titans and Jags would be the ones on it. Seattle's line's a little bit too high this week, I think. They are getting 4.5 against Dallas. Dallas getting a lot of respect. This line basically implies Dallas would be a 2-point favorite on a neutral. I don't know if that's true. I know Seattle has so many injuries on defense. If Bobby Wagner doesn't play here, with all the problems they have in the back seven now without Chancellor, who's, a really good run stopper at his safety position, I don't know how this Seahawks defense stacks up. What I do know is that Russell Wilson's pretty damn good. So, with a line that looks a little bit too high, the Seahawks are somewhat attractive. But again, after talking through the two previous leans here, I think I may have, my card, or maybe I'll pick something that I haven't discussed yet on the show here.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind fading the Cowboys, though. When Tyron Smith left that last game, they looked terrible. I mean, they still have problems protecting Dakota there, and I don't care about these pictures that we've seen from Mexico with Ezekiel Elliott working out. I'm skeptical if those are from this year, because he arrived at the team facility, and I saw that picture, and he looked fat. Now, I'm overweight. I have got no room to talk. But, boy, Ezekiel Elliott did not look the same from those pictures in Cabo or wherever he is working out to where when he arrived at the facility. So I don't know what impact he's making. And from what I've read, Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright should be back for this game. So front seven should be full bore. If Tyron Smith and that back and the knee now that he's having issues with misses, this is a decent spot for the Seahawks. And I think the Cowboys, they could play their way in. Elliott's back. It's a great story. But what's actually on the field is not a great product. They're nothing close to that Dallas team of last year. And, anybody ready to play a prop on Ezekiel Elliott, I think has another thing coming. I'm kind of expecting him to start off pretty slow. And I think the Dallas would be smart to just use Rod Smith some more. That Smith kid just looks great. The Jalen Smith's younger brother, they're both from the Fort Wayne area. He's playing hard. He's catching the ball well. Alfred Morris looks good. I don't know if we see a lot of Elliott right now, because I'm still suspect of what shape he's in. And if I play the contrary in a game here, I wouldn't mind playing the Seahawks, because this is still, I think, really a spotty Cowboys team at best.
Well, interesting. It's a compelling case there, and something I'll have to consider as I look ahead to finalizing these picks on Friday night. But again, what I'm looking at here would be the Jets, Bills, and Eagles as picks, Titans, Jaguars, Seahawks as the leans, and I'll probably end up picking two of those three, or, if something pops up on Friday, grabbing a fifth pick from somewhere else. But, Joe, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me. You can find Joe Everett's work over at NFL Draft Bible. You can follow Joe on Twitter at Joe W. Everett. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas to you and yours, bud. We'll talk to you again sometime next week.
Yeah, likewise. Happy holidays, everybody. And thanks for putting up with me this year.